I'm excited to start off our first episode of season 2 of Coach Connect with Ellen Goldman. So, welcome back to Coach Connect. Here's where we explore the stories and strategies and insights from trailblazers who are transforming the world of coaching and well being. What drives your success? What fuels their passions for helping others? We're here to uncover their secrets and share them with you. This show is brought to you by Vibely.io, the all in one coaching platform designed to empower coaches with tools, resources, and support they need to thrive and help their clients achieve meaningful, long lasting growth. I'm Dr. Diego Salinas, your guide on this journey. As a neuroscientist, physician, health coach, and co founder of Vibely, I'm committed to celebrating the incredible work of coaches everywhere and helping them unlock their full potential. So, together, let's dive in deep into what makes coaching powerful and a force of change. So, like I mentioned, today's first episode of our season 2 is with Ellen Goldman. She created EllenG Coaching to provide coaching and training to professionals and entrepreneurs who are worried about their health and happiness due to exhaustion, burnout, weight issues, and other challenges. Ellen's mission is to help business professionals get self care back on their daily to do list. Throughout her coaching programs and online courses, Ellen shows clients how to integrate health into their busy lifestyle with simple, small steps that lead to massive change, resulting in higher energy, improved focus, increased productivity, and overall happiness. Ellen has over 40 years of experience in the health, wellness, and fitness industries, working as a personal trainer, certified health coach, a business owner, wife, mom. Ellen knows firsthand that you do not need to sacrifice your health and happiness to have a successful career. Ellen is a national board certified health and wellness coach, an ICF PCC, and author of Mastering the Inner Game of Weight Loss, an easy to follow guide to permanent weight loss without going on a diet. You can pick up a copy of her special report and audio series, 52 Tips to Calm, Healthy, and Productive Work Week and Life at www.calmhealthylife.com. And to learn more about Ellen and her wellness programs, visit ellengcoaching.com. We'll have those links at the end of the podcast there as well. Ellen, what an honor to have you on as our first guest to kick off the 2025 new year with such a topic that we get asked all the time, I'm sure, from coaches and clients and friends as well. Thank you for being on our podcast today.
Oh, and thank you, Diego. I'm excited to be here and Happy New Year to everybody, to you, to all of our listeners. And yeah, I'm really honored that I get to kick off the new year with you.
Yeah. And Ellen, kind of went over your brief bio, but people love hearing the story of kind of what got you passionate about health and wellness and how you end up finding coaching as kind of your lane that you kind of really flourished in health and well-being.
Okay, that's a long road. So, um, I, at a fairly young uh, age, I guess when I was starting to first think about, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? I was drawn in the direction of health and wellness, and I think it's because of what I what I grew up with. So I'm one of the blessed ones to say that I had a really great mom and dad. We had a very good childhood, lots of fun, lots of meaningful time together. But there was a lot of stress and struggles in the household as well. We were a family of five in a very small apartment. My mother, in a day and age when most women were not working but staying home full time to raise their kids, was kind of forced into working part time. Dad would come home from work, mom would go off to work to make ends meet.
Mm,
So there was a lot of financial stress in the household, and I think for my mother in particular, that led to a pattern of some stress eating and some difficulties of just really neglecting herself,
mm.
which ended up being a lifetime battle with her weight. Lots of back problems later on. You know, Definitely some emotional regulation problems where, she was like the most loving and adoring, fabulous mom, but then something would kick her off and she'd kind of like be this like crazy lady. Dad, on the other hand, who also worked really, really hard. There were times I remember my dad holding down three jobs at the same time. And he, though, was very into his free time. Yes, devoting a lot of it with the kids, but what he did is he took us to the tennis courts, he took us to the ice skating rink, he took us bowling. There was a lot of movement, a lot of exercise. Dad really took good care of himself. And so he balanced his stress a lot better than my mother did. And of course, this was this dynamic going on and all.
Mm.
And I don't know, at some young adult age, I started watching this. And when I would see my mom, who was so brilliant, such an intelligent, wonderful lady with so many gifts to offer the world, was not as happy as she should have been. I mean,
Mm.
thankfully, long story short, my mother lived to 101. And the last chapter, the last, 25 years of her life really were wonderful,
Wow.
but she shouldn't have had to have waited that long. So I just remember as a young adult, when I would look at my mom and I would think to myself, gosh, there has to be a better way to do things. There just, being on a diet your whole life is not what it should be. Being stressed, not being able to sleep because of your worries, and just not taking care of yourself because you were so busy taking care of everybody else.
Mm.
And that was my mom to a T. And there was just this feeling in me like, nah, there's got to be a better way to do this. We should be able to do both.
Yeah.
So I was drawn to health and wellness. I actually went to school for physical education. I thought I was going to be a gym teacher, which never ever happened, and ended up right out of college getting into adult fitness. And I really fell in love with adult fitness, which was what led me to eventually I worked in fitness clubs. I worked in fitness management. When personal training became early on the scene, I'm like, okay, this is my next chapter. I became certified as a personal trainer and eventually made the decision to go into business for myself because I wanted to be able to draw the boundaries. By that time I had young kids at home,
Hmm.
and I didn't want to be, you know, um, I guess responsible to a boss that was going to dictate to me what I had to do. And, if my kid was doing a performance in school, I wanted to be there, but I still wanted to be working. And the only way I could really accomplish that at that point was to be my own boss.
Yeah.
So I started my personal training business and I loved it and did it for a long, long, long time. But over the years, what I realized the more I worked with individuals was that there was an underlying frustration in me. I couldn't quite figure out why it was that some of my clients would come to me initially, say, this is what I want to accomplish, whether it was, it could be weight loss, it could be better sleep, just, better health, whatever it was. And some of them, and unfortunately, it was a really small percentage of them, went on and they accomplished that.
Yeah.
But the bulk, I used to say, if you are going to be a personal trainer, you better be ready for a lot of failure,
Mm.
because the majority, even though maybe they were showing up to work out with me 2 or 3 times a week, were actually not making the changes they needed to be making during those other, 23 hours that had to support the hour in the gym with me.
You're right.
And it frustrated me. And I kept thinking, what am I doing wrong? You know,
Right.
what's the program that I could write or the words that I could say to motivate these clients to get them to just do what they needed to do?
Right.
That
What's the
little bit of
magic key? The one copy that will just change everyone that universally applies no matter what.
Yep. I used to joke around. I used to say to my clients, every one of you have been to bed with me at night, because I would lie in bed and I would think about this one or that one. It's like,
Right.
what could I say to them? Or how could I help them? And then I got introduced to coaching. And at that
Mm.
point in time, we're going a lot of years. I'm really dating myself back here. It was the world of life coaching. There was no such thing as wellness coaching. There was no such thing as health coaching. Life coaching was just beginning to emerge on the horizon. I actually learned about life coaching at a fitness conference.
Mm.
And it was
Mhm.
like this light bulb went off. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's the missing piece. It's not something that I need to do. It's a way I need to be with my clients. And so I made this decision like, okay, my kids were in high school at the time. And I'm like, okay, when the kids leave for college and I have a little bit more free time on my hands, I'm going to study and become certified as a life coach. And I will specialize in health and wellness. And about a year after that decision, and I started reading a lot about life coaching, and I was looking into all these different life coaching certification programs and all. And I, being a member of the American College of Sports Medicine, got an email from them telling me about this affiliation that they were entering into with well coaches. And this was in the early 2000s.
Mhm.
And lo and behold, there was this company called Well Coaches, which was doing exactly what I wanted, which they were training healthcare professionals in coaching psychology
Mm.
and certifying them to be wellness coaches. And I was like, oh my God, I don't have to invent the wheel. It's right here. So I made an exploratory phone call, literally saying, let me just get a little information. And about 45 minutes or an hour later, I was ripping out my credit card and I signed up for this course about 2 years earlier than I anticipated.
Mm,
And I've never turned back. And
yeah.
then, just deeply fell in love with the whole coaching field, the positive psychology, the understanding of behavioral change.
Mm, yeah.
And over time, just kind of transitioned away from the personal training and went into the coaching full time and suddenly began to understand why all those clients back then were having such a difficult time. The ones that didn't become the lifelong exercisers. And
Yeah.
what really was missing is they did not know how to do behavioral change.
Yeah. What a story, and so much learning there. Taking really your roots from your childhood and seeing the range between your mom and dad, both internally within them, but also as dynamic, right? What's possible of like self care isn't
Mhm.
selfish, right? And that taking care of yourself is
Yeah.
how you care for others. And of course, a lot of parents really struggle with that because part of early parenting, the first, let's say, few months, you are sacrificing your self care for the kid. You're not
Yep.
sleeping well
Absolutely.
because to feed them every 2 3 hours, or her every 2 3 hours, right?
And that's okay during those first few months, but it
Yes.
shouldn't be that way during the first few years. There is this
Yes.
time when that you start to shift once your kid is sleeping through the night, or if they're not, maybe it means bringing on more help. I mean,
Yeah.
every situation is so unique and so individual.
Yeah.
But at the core, my personal belief is at the core, you have to embrace the fact that every single thing that you want to do and to do well, and certainly we all want to be great parents, we all want to be great at our jobs, we want to be wonderful in our relationships. It doesn't matter what you want to do, you will do it better if you have a foundation of health and well-being. And that is really what brought me to where I am and who I work with.
Yeah.
you know um, when I first started my business, and again, health coaching, we were like, what the heck is that?
Yeah.
Wellness coach? I never heard of such a thing. Like, what do you do?
Yeah.
Like, you
Are you,
motivate me to lose weight?
right.
They didn't understand it. So I went out and I started marketing my business through networking.
Yeah.
I didn't have to do that with personal training. People knew what personal training was. They knew me because I worked in our local community center. So I grew my business really easily. I didn't do a lot of marketing. I didn't do networking. I filled the hours I wanted to work. Now I'm in this whole new profession that nobody understands.
Yeah.
So I started networking and I started joining a lot of entrepreneurial groups, chamber of commerces, things like that, and started meeting all these business professionals, entrepreneurs, super creative, most of them really intelligent.
Yeah.
And over time, as they started to get to know me and would feel more comfortable with me, they would suddenly start sharing with me things like, you know, I sleep about 4.5, 5 hours a week, a night. You know, I've gained 25 pounds
Yeah.
since I started my business. You know, I'm really struggling because, I'm missing out a lot of stuff with my family.
Yeah.
My spouse is really pissed at me because I'm on my phone during, and that days it was the BlackBerry. That was the newest thing. Everybody had a BlackBerry and they were like, you know, and I was like, oh, here's my niche.
Yeah.
These are the people who really needed my help. And I felt like I was coming from this experience of figuring it out for myself because I was not going to repeat my mom's mistakes. I
Yeah.
learned a lot from my mother and I embraced a lot from my mom because there
Break
was a
those
lot of
patterns.
great stuff.
Yeah.
But that was something I wasn't going to hold on to. And I had to figure out, how was I going to take care of myself when I had two kids under 3 years old?
Right.
How
Yeah.
was I going to do that when they were
Put the
a
mask on.
tiny bit older, not much? And I went back to work. So I had figured it out. And, I'm really proud to say that as an adult, there's really never been a time where I have felt like I have not taken care of myself.
Mm,
And so I was like, I'm firm in the belief you do not have to sacrifice yourself to succeed at your career.
Yeah. And not only that, it's that it actually is taking care of yourself as how you will succeed in your career, how you see as a parent, right? It's this a lot of these, look at schooling or education, we're forced to in a short period do things that are unhealthy, right? When I was in medicine, I had to do 24-hour calls. That is not healthy.
No, I'm sure
Just
not.
like statistics, not healthy for you, right? But you're forced to do that, and then problem is those behaviors become reinforced action in the short term,
Mhm.
and then
Oh yeah.
breaking that behavior is really hard. So, and you also point to, um, it feels counter to there's not enough time in the day to take care of myself. I have to do all these obligations. But one thing I started learning also with my client work is, well, actually taking care of yourself, it might take up more time now, but it makes you much more efficient when you are there. So people say, parents say, well, I don't want to meditate. I'm losing time with my kid. I go, watch when you meditate for those 10 minutes, how long it is. Yeah, maybe 10 minutes less, but you're actually for an hour much more present with your child versus kind of being in the phone up in there. And not only more efficient, an underlying theme was in your intro and your message, Ellen, is you're enjoying your process as much as you can. It's not just only for the outcome. I'm going to sweat it out and then find happiness, fulfillment when I reach the summit. Because if you ask anyone who's in performance, sports, business, whatever it is, there's a common theme of I got the gold medal. That didn't really make me as happy as I
Yeah.
thought I would.
Yeah.
You have to enjoy, or it doesn't mean it's always going to be easy,
Yeah.
but it, but enjoy and
Sometimes the idea is simple, but that does not mean it's easy.
yeah. Yeah, and I
You
think
know,
the population you work with, I'm gonna throw us in this population. I haven't always done the best job taking care of myself, and it could feel frustrating to be so competent and capable, so smart in some areas, but then be like, "Why am I not getting this thing done?" Or "Why is this not happening?" And we think, "Is it self-sabotage? What's wrong with me?" And I find that client work really shows us, or one thing you're honored and privileged to see, we all have these awesome strengths and all have things that we struggle with. That's
mhm,
universal. What those
absolutely.
are wildly different,
Yes,
and it's often a continuum.
absolutely.
Your ability to hyper focus on one thing means you don't focus on another. There's a
Right.
commonality here. So, what would you say are some of the about turning those into reality? Some of the kind of misconceptions maybe that you had before you started learning behavior change and coaching. Some of the students that you help teach, or some of the clients you had, kind of common misconceptions on why things aren't happening or getting to that
Yeah.
resolution, make it reality.
So what comes to my mind immediately is something that I've heard from just almost every client initially when we're kind of doing intakes and figuring out, what is working, what maybe not working. You hear this all the time. I'm lousy at time management.
Mm, okay.
And so I think a big mind shift has to be it is not about time management. It's actually about energy management. And one of my sayings, if you've been anybody who's been following me for a long time knows that, Ellen's got a couple of things. One of them is it's not time management, it's energy management if you
Mm,
want to be extraordinary at anything. You have
wow.
to be able to manage your energy because you can have the best time management skills under the sun. And I love the study of time. Man, I'm a productivity geek.
Oh,
I just love, you know, hacks and tricks and exploring different types of, note keeping, and I love all that stuff. However, I could be an expert at that, but if I don't have the energy to follow through on those time management hacks,
mm,
nothing's changing, nothing's getting done. So I think we have to embrace this idea that the time you put into whether it's sleep or getting to the gym or meditation, all of those things are managing your energy, which will then allow you to do the other things, as you say, absolutely with more efficiency
mhm,
and more effectively. When you're tired, you make mistakes.
right.
Mistakes cost you time to correct them. You know,
Yeah.
when you're tired, the email you need to write, which really should only take you 10 minutes, takes you an hour because you just can't focus and you can't think right.
Yeah.
So I think that's the first thing. There's got to be this kind of shift of, it's all about energy management. Energy management is part of and probably the foundational of becoming extraordinary at whatever you do.
Mm,
The
yeah.
other common mistake, and I think it's starting to shift a little bit, but a few years ago, and certainly back when I, first started really working with business professionals, there was this whole aura around multitasking, becoming a king or queen of multitasking.
Right.
And I have always said that multitasking is actually the enemy of extraordinary.
Yeah.
If you want to be wonderful at anything, you actually have to learn how not to multitask because it's actually you can't multitask. The brain doesn't work that way. You're not multitasking. What you're doing is you're multi-shifting. You're shifting
Yes.
from one thing to another to another to another. And brain research proves it doesn't work, and that the amount of time it takes you to get re-centered on what you just left. So multitasking is actually the enemy of doing anything well. I mean, look, you want to fold the laundry while you're watching TV? Be my guest. If it's stuff that's not that important,
Right.
you can multitask or
Or rote
do
tasks.
more
Yeah.
than right. Exactly. But when you're trying to do great work,
Yeah.
and I include not just great work, but maintain great relationships, the
Mhm.
worst thing in the world is multitasking your relationships.
Mm.
You're doing your emails while you're talking to your kid or your spouse or even a business professional, another
Yeah.
colleague. It's like, oh.
Right.
So you need to learn to throw out multitasking and replace it with what I refer to as full engagement.
Mm.
Really training your brain to stay really focused on one task, one person, one conversation at a time if it's an important one, if the outcome of it is important.
Nice. Yeah. Oh, so much there. Each of these two main points, so many branching points. But what I'm seeing is a differentiation between almost like coaching. There's what to do, the multitasking part, how to do those things efficiently and get into the productivity hacks and all those things. But most people may jump to that, right? I was talking this with my co-founder about, behavior change. I'm like, listen, there's strategies here, but that's not the magic. It's the motivation to make that happen. And part of that motivation is the energy management. First of all, cultivating your own internal motivation. But you're at a great point. If you're ever in that email, not only is it going to take you much longer, but you're going to be frustrated and off and not feel good during it. People say, I want to find flow. I want to find flow. Flow is actually the peak performance, but it requires a lot of things. You
Mhm.
require to be skillful in a certain thing. When I'm training coaches, they go, I want to find flow. I'm like, you can't flow the first time you're learning music scale. You have to be
Of course not.
proficient for a while, but it involves all things outside of that one skill set. If you're not sleeping well, if you're really tired, it's going to be hard to be in that max performance state. If you didn't eat all day long, if you're an athlete, how are you going to run your best marathon if you didn't eat for 24 hours? Right. So almost you're saying it really just starts with energy management, regardless of the category it is. And people want to just jump and say, well, I understand sleep. I understand what to do after that. I don't know. First, do this first. Once
Yeah.
that's tuned up, then let's talk about some of the how to dos.
Yeah. It's interesting that you're talking about sleep because it comes up so much.
Hmm.
W- One of the things that I think we coaches deal with a lot is, you'll get a new client, somebody who's coming to you, they've made the decision they want to enter into a coaching relationship. There's usually some kind of very concrete change they're looking for. So whether it's, I want to lose 25 pounds, or, I want to start exercising all the time, or I want to, you know, I want to double my income, but I'm not following through on the steps I need to do to grow my business. I mean, there's some concrete usually reason why somebody says, you know what, yeah, I'm going to raise my hand, let's coach together. And then they sit down, we start doing this kind of intake, and it's like, well, where do they want to begin? And they want to begin with that.
Mm,
Well, what do I need to do to double my income, or what do I need to do to lose that 25? And I think you have to step back, and first we have to really think, like, everything is connected. So we have to look at the entire system. And again, I keep coming back to it because I so firmly believe it. It starts with the foundation of health and self care. and self-care has a lot of meaning for a lot of different people. On a surface level, it appears like self-care is these, the umbrellas that the umbrellas of health, the spot, the sleep and the nutrition and the hydration and those concrete. And yes, absolutely, that's self-care. But, self-care also might be that in the evening I spend an hour by myself because I need quiet time.
Mhm.
Self
Yeah.
care might be for somebody, you know, meeting a friend for lunch, because self care for me is social connection. That's what fills
Yeah.
my energy. So you really have to explore, energy management through self care of what's going to fill you up. And yes, I do think you have to pay attention to these basics because they impact that whole physiology.
Yes.
The
Yeah.
psychology is intertwined with it, but that physiology impacts the psychology. So when I
Yeah.
get somebody who starts to feel kind of overwhelmed, I don't know where to begin. I will actually make the suggestion, and I try very hard not to make suggestions in coaching. I want clients to figure out really where their motivation is. But if there's overwhelm and they're not making progress, or they don't know where to start and they're feeling frustrated, we start by talking about sleep,
Mm. The foundation. Yeah.
because it is the foundation. you
Right.
know because when we're not well rested, our brains are not functioning. Our prefrontal cortex, boom, lights are
Yeah.
off, and
Yeah.
our
Yeah.
emotional brain, woo, the lights are way on. And
Oh,
when
yeah.
we are driving the bus with our emotional brain, we're not making good sound decisions.
Yeah.
So whatever you're trying to make decisions around changing, you're not going to make good sound decisions. You're not going to be able to stay motivated. You're not going to be able to follow through with your intentions if you're sleep deprived
Yeah.
and you're running on empty.
Right. Your decision making capacity goes down. So I remember when I was in in a residency, we had a lecture on how important sleep was to us. I had to go after overnight call, ironically, and talking about how after, and the surgeon who gave the talk was also post shift, and talking about how after 24 hours of sleep deprivation, your decision making capacity is the same as a blood alcohol level of 0.08. You're legally drunk, can't drive. Right? So, like you're saying, right, all this stuff is it's not just strong evidence showing sleep
Right.
deprivation. I mean, you can all think about the time you had to pull all-nighter, how you can make a choice, and if you do make a choice, your energy isn't there to follow through. And energy management, I had this I posted a clip I think a few weeks ago about this, Ellen. Curious your thoughts. I talk about restoration being two categories for the umbrella down. There's active restoration and passive restoration. You kind of already touched on both. I consider passive restoration that base restoration. You need to sleep.
Mhm.
And how many hours depends on each person, but basically until you feel rested is the answer. It's a bell-shaped curve. Each one's different, but the whole point of sleep is to feel rested, right?
Right.
So you need a baseline level of this like sleep at a constant, intervals. How that works for you, that has to happen. But there are other things that you mentioned a few. I call active restoration, and those are things that in the moment will take. You have to expend energy to do it,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? So think about running. For me, it's rollerblading or skating, right? So when I go rollerblading, I expend calories. You can put an Apple Watch and measure how many calories it is or something, right? You're letting it out there. But when I come back, I feel my battery is recharged in a different way. I
Mhm.
have ideas for my company. I'm excited to, get respond to something. I have new insights. The next morning, I'm happy I enjoyed my day in the sunset so I can then work the next morning, early morning, and it doesn't feel like, right? Socialization, right? One of the biggest predictors of longevity and well-being is the quality of our connections. And what those things are, this is where the client knowing themselves is really important, because what that is different to each person. Like even going in the flow state, right? People will describe it very similar. There's time dilation, I'm losing this time. The world kind of disappears. You mentioned present or focused. You mentioned full engagement. you know, you're right there. And someone could be talking about, I've had clients about skydiving being that for them.
Uh-huh.
I've had times call about crocheting being that for them,
Mhm.
right? Whatever is your active restoration is not your partner, your friend, your mother, your daughter, it's your own. And what might happen also is that these points are going to change throughout time, as you mentioned, Ellen. When you or had a newborn, And you find that balance there versus 2 or 3 year old versus 5 to 6 is going to be constantly adapting. So
Absolutely.
the real part is you can get to it. The reality is you have to maintain this balance because it's a process, not an outcome.
Yeah. So I think what you're describing is one of the greatest gifts that we coaches give to our clients, because you said, everybody is so individual and so unique, and what fills my tank is not necessarily what's going to fill your tank. I mean, if take two people who are, say, baseline, doing a great job with the foundations, they're sleeping, they're eating properly, they're doing their workouts, they're all of that, but yet one feels exhausted all the time
Mm,
and the other feels energized all the time. It's not always those baselines. It's like, well, what's not filling your cup? What's depleting your energy? What's filling your energy? Most people don't spend a whole lot of time thinking about that. They don't take time to reflect on what is, when do I feel the most energized and when do I feel the most depleted? They don't. They just go through life. And suddenly they're in this coaching relationship, and we coaches are asking them those kind of questions.
mm,
We're sending them back to, the field, that research lab, the world
yes.
they live in, and asking them to reflect on this during the week.
Yeah.
Notice, I'll often in the early spot, I'll say, just at the end of the day, I want you to kind of like just take a 2-3 minute inventory of your day and think about, when were the moments that you felt the best? What were you doing? Who were you with?
Mm,
When was the moments where you felt just exhausted, stressed out? What was going on? Just kind of teaching our clients how to reflect. We
yeah.
human beings are not very reflective creatures, especially when it comes to our own behaviors. We may spend hours reflecting around our children's behaviors, our spouse's behaviors, our colleagues' behaviors. But
Yeah.
when it comes to our own behaviors, we don't spend a whole lot of time reflecting about that.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the most important gifts that we coaches do, is we open up this space to have these conversations in this very non-judgmental way, in a safe environment where people can get some of the crazy thoughts out of their head and actually voice them out loud and say,
Yeah.
oh gosh, the world doesn't fall apart because I just admitted this or said this. And, my coach is not looking at me like, oh my God, are you crazy? You have that thought? It's like, yeah, well, I can understand that. It's like, you can.
Yeah.
And so we give them this space in this coaching relationship to take a little bit of time to do these things, to think about, what is it in my life that's working? What is it that maybe isn't working so well? And maybe what can I do to shift it? I don't have to just accept that, this is the way it is and this is the way it's always going to be, which is
Yeah.
really kind of funny. It makes me think about the time that we're in now, this New Year's, and everybody wanting to do their New Year's resolution. There's this, this thing out there like, okay, this is the time, it's January 1st. Here's when you're supposed to be reflecting on your life, make these big decisions about what is working, what isn't working. One time a year, I'm going
Yeah.
to do this. And then what do? We set ourselves up for failure. We say like, all right, I've had enough of this. I'm going to set these grand resolutions. And, we all know that, I don't know, they've even named a day. I forget what day in February, where it's supposedly like all the resolutions have already fallen apart. We should be doing ongoing assessment.
Mm,
It doesn't necessarily have to be daily. Maybe in the beginning, when you're doing your self exploration of really, when you enter into a coaching relationship, maybe you are going to be doing these kind of daily figuring things out.
yeah.
What is really going to work for me? What is really going to make me content? I don't even like to use the word happy, because
Yeah. Yeah.
happy people look around like thinking like, oh, I'm so happy today. No, I just want to be content.
Right.
Sometimes
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
going to be happier. Sometimes I'm not going to be so happy. But overall, I want to be content. I want
Yeah.
to know that the life I'm living is what makes me content and fulfilled, and it has meaning and it has purpose. That doesn't usually just happen because we were lucky enough to fall into it.
Yeah.
It
Right.
takes a little work and a little design, and that's where I think, the whole field of coaching has kind of gifted to the world, and those that are really starting to embrace it and understand where it can be making so many impacts
Yeah.
is because we have every single one of us, including us coaches, need to step back from the everyday grind and do some assessments and do some
Yeah.
evaluations and get very clear on what our own personal values are. Because
Yeah.
I
What's the fuel that
believe
drives us? Yeah.
exactly. It's at at the end of the day, when you are living life in congruency with your values, you're going to be content. It does not mean that life is perfect. It doesn't mean you won't have problems. It won't mean that you won't have, times where you don't even know if you can survive the adversities that get thrown at you. But if you're living life in congruency with your values, you will get through those times and you'll be okay and you'll be happy and content.
Yeah.
When we are the most discontent, I think it's when we really start to explore there's something that's not congruent with our true values.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whether it's we're hanging out with somebody whose values are so off from ours that they're making us feel uncomfortable, but yet we're still going back for more. Or you're working in a job where you don't value the same things that the company values. I had, just a little client story. I had a
Mhm.
client several years ago who came to me, and she was a super high functioning, CEO making a lot of money. From the outside, you would look at her and think this woman's world was great. The supportive, wonderful husband, the beautiful kids. I mean, everything looked perfect. And she was taking really good care of herself. She was, really, she was getting the sleep. She was taking time off when needed. She did her exercise. It was like, and she came to me with like, why am I so exhausted all
Mm.
the time? Like I sleep for 8 hours, I wake up, I'm exhausted. I'm getting through my day, I'm doing my job, but at the end of the day, I'm exhausted. So I'm so tired of feeling tired, and I don't know why I'm feeling tired.
Mhm.
And so we did my own kind of version of an energy assessment that I've created over the years of, and I actually compare it to like your a gas tank. What when you're on empty versus full, and what are the things that
Yeah.
fill the tank. And we went through this, and what she discovered after a lot of hard work is she realized that the position that she was working in was she was good at it, but it was so not what was bringing her. It didn't light her
Yeah.
up. She was going through the motions of something that she was really good at, that she'd been told that she was really good at since she's a little kid. And she was just doing this. And it was like, I remember the session where she said, oh my God, I hate my job.
Mm.
That's why
Yeah.
I'm so exhausted.
Yeah. Yeah.
The interesting, the happy ending of this story is that she actually didn't have to change companies. She was ready to like, I'm gonna like quit my job. I'm gonna go, whoa, slow down. Long story short, she was able to actually revamp her position.
Mm.
She went into a different division. She trained somebody to take over her. It made all the difference in the world.
Yeah.
And so you got to figure out, as you said, we're all such unique individuals.
Yeah.
Got to figure out what is going to make our world the world we want to be existing in every single day.
Yeah, Ellen, it's funny your analogy for a gas tank. I have an analogy I've used with brains with my clients. So I'm going to share this one too. And for all the new coaches out there, create your own analogies. What we're trying to do here is really complex, abstract things or have people understand. Analogies are a great way to maybe, please some sort of framework. I would say this: each brain is like a vehicle. Each brain has like 10 to 100 billion neurons, can make 10 to 100 trillion synapses. So when I say we're all different, it's not just kumbaya, which is wonderful, by the way. It's just mathematics. It's just impossible because our brains are affected by our environment. So even twins aren't the same, et cetera, right? I go, each brain's a vehicle, but we're all different vehicles. And I don't mean we're all cars. Even cars are really different, right? A semi truck versus a sports car is better or worse, depends where your function is, right? Some people are airplanes, some people are submarines. You got to find what's your fuel and what's your emission. And I think from a coaching perspective, I tell people we're two scientists each week running experiments. We're just going to learn from the data. And you mentioned we're not really good at awareness. And I find it so interesting. If you, like last year, I just thought we are such a species that is so rooted in behavior and habits, right? How we function, how we run. It's so automatic in us, and we can see behaviors so obvious in our friends, family around us. Oh, that person acts this way. It's why we have people with friends we like, that there's a certain expectation of how they're going to be. Yet we are so ironically blind to our own mechanisms and behavior. We're really good at seeing others make, parts and moving parts in their vehicles, but we don't know where our carburetor, our radiator is, or where our,
Right.
So I think part of the coaching process is, as a client, to get that fully optimized running system. It's knowing your fuel, also knowing what depletes you, where is not your place to be, right? So I do a lot of meetings all day. For real example, meet people, yeah, it's tiring, but I love it. I can do 8 hours of meetings all day. Not that it's not exhausting in its own way, but I can do that. So my co-founders are like, how do you do that? I'm like, I couldn't do, to me, 8 hours of email is what depletes me.
I
Right?
would
We have
agree.
our own different, I don't think anyone loves emails, but for example, all our
Right.
different things. And it's really understanding it doesn't matter what someone else does, a celebrity does, someone who's really successful does, they're not you. Their recipes aren't going to work for you. And so in this vehicle analogy, we're helping clients understand their barometers better. So you're seeing your speedometer, your RPMs, your temperature way sooner than when it's the check engine light or the smoke's come out of the hood.
Right.
Right. And there's all these things. And awareness, I think you're saying, Ellen, is that first step. We don't have to, we often are unaware of our blind spots. Think about what we thought about 5 or 10 years ago. I'm like, that means today I have blind spots that I won't know till 5 or 10 years from now. And hopefully that means that if it's true, that means I'm growing. It's not a bad thing. We all judge ourselves. I was so stupid back then. Yeah, but that's how wisdom is from that learned experience.
That's the expression, hindsight is 2020. I mean, that's where
Hindsight's
it comes
2020.
from. If I knew then what I knew now and all that, which is an interesting perspective too, because sometimes it's being able to let go of that.
Yes. Yeah.
Because, I think that we humans are our own worst critics.
Yeah.
And we beat ourselves up for what we think are our mistakes of the past. I come in and I've learned to apply it to myself. I mean, it was easier to apply it to my clients than everybody else, but I really apply to myself is that I really believe that everybody is doing the best they can with the information they have at the time.
Yeah. Yes.
So if things didn't work out the way you wanted to, it's not because you were bad at your job or you were a bad parent. It's you did hopefully you did the best that you could do with the information that you had at that time. And you didn't have enough information.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't even that because you needed to go out and get more information, but it's because you needed to go through the experience to gain that information.
Yeah.
Life
Wisdom
is
is
a
lived, not
learning
taught, right?
Yep. Life
Yeah.
is a learning experience.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we need to be able to be okay with like, hey, I'm doing the best I can. And that means I'm going to screw up sometimes.
Yes.
And I'm not going to beat myself up from it. I'm going to learn. It's another interesting thing about, the gift of coaching.
Yeah.
So part of the job that I do is I do mentor coaching for trainees at well coaches who are becoming certified coaches, and they need to work with a mentor before they sit for their oral exams. And there's a very specific kind of role play that they have to go through.
Mm-hmm.
And in this 30-minute role play, there are 4 times where the coach is expected to ask the client what they learned. Whether they learned from the experience working on a goal, what they've learned since they started coaching, what did they learn from the session that day. And I love to explain this to the trainees. I always joke and I say, well, coaches loves the learning question. And why is that? Why do we love that question so much? And we just encourage our coaches to learn how to ask that constantly. What did you learn from today's session? It's because of the fact that human beings are not very reflective creatures when it comes to their own behavior. By constantly asking your coaching clients, what did you learn? You are actually training them to become more reflective. Right. When we become more reflective, it translates into becoming way more proactive than reactive around our behaviors.
Ellen, so much wisdom there. I mean, like part of that coaching mentioned were non-judgment early in the conversation,
Hmm.
right? We often, and I told you before, I'm very guilt and shame prone. I think a lot of us are, and that causes us to withdraw, avoid, not inactivate in state. But we look at results as data. So the client come in, you know, first question after follow-up session, how did it go last week? Diego is terrible. I failed at everything. I wanted to work on the morning, but on Monday morning, I was, a meeting was happening. On Wednesday, my kid was sick. On Friday, I just failed all week. And I'm like, what if you learned that maybe mornings aren't the most flexible time for you? Oh, that means next we can try afternoons, and we'll try, and will it work? I don't know. You don't know until you do the work, right? And that this reframing, and maybe first part is noticing you do have judgments on yourself, that they are negative. You're doing those, and then, like you mentioned, Ellen, when you add awareness to the puzzle, that's where change is possible because we think so quickly that's hard to separate your raw input from your processing. If I can give a
Mm.
nerdy neuroscience example on vision, but it relates to behavior change too. Everyone watching this right now, if I put this water bottle closer to the camera, right? Everyone assumes it's getting closer to me, right? Or to the camera, to the source. But what your eye is seeing is it's getting bigger. But you're interpreting it is not that it's magically shrinking and getting bigger all the time. It's getting your interpretation is getting, but you can't unsee that. What you're seeing is bigger or smaller. You're interpreting is closer or farther. You can't separate. So the thing with behavior change, there actually is a chance if we can understand how emotions happen, see those patterns, maybe interject. You may still feel that first feeling, but the more awareness you have, and awareness you mentioned, Ellen, is not going to happen by accident. People say, well, you know what?
No.
This week's goal, I'm just being more aware of my patterns. How are you going to do that if that's not what you normally did? You at first, you mentioned you do have to have those training wheels on. For example, this bracelet I usually wear is my mindfulness bracelet because it's kind of old and it loosens up.
Mm.
And so whenever I have to retighten it, I take a moment to do a minute of mindfulness, no matter where I'm at, because it's a random interval timer for me, right? And so whatever your system is, but you have to practice at first to do this. And it's so not only non-intuitive, it can be so uncomfortable. If I give one
Oh,
example of a
yeah.
client I had early on, I was doing a discovery call or the first session. I do 90 minutes for a first session, right? Sometimes even 2 hours. It's long
Mhm.
first session.
Me
We deep
too.
dive, right? And so we want to go into the weeds here, right? Into the depth, the roots. And I asked the client a question, and he goes, it's a good question, doc. Next question.
Love it. That's a good question, but I don't want to deal with that.
And I said, well, if it's a good question, do you want to take the time to answer it now? He's like, we can do it. I'm like, this is the whole point is this is workshop. This is the time to work through things. Our whole week is so busy. We'll just answer next thing. This is time. He goes, okay. And this is when I was still in person in a different city. And I had a clock on the wall. I was like, I'm looking outside. Take the time you need. I'm gonna enjoy the birds and the clock. You take all the time you need. Ellen, it was literally 90 seconds, a minute and a half of silence. And people are like, that's so awkward. I'm like, but the client had an answer. He thought it through for 90 seconds. That not only did he not have the time to do it earlier on, he didn't even earlier have the capacity to think it's possible to slow down and think for this long.
Yeah. It's such a beautiful point about silence. And I do think also, I see in newer coaches are super uncomfortable with silence. When they
Mm,
hear that silence, they think they're supposed to jump in with a reflection or another question, or they make their reflections way too long because they
yeah.
stop and the client doesn't start talking. So they keep reflecting. And it's like, no, you really have to be okay with the silence, because that's the moment that your client, I call it sitting in the muck, you
Hmm.
know, and you have to do that in order to get out of the muck. You got to sit in that moment of like, huh,
Mm,
let me think about this. And
yeah.
again, it's like it's the gift that we keep giving them, because we don't do that. You get up in the morning and you got your to-do list is here, and you've got your meetings, and you got to pick up the kids or whatever the heck your day is running. How often do we kind of sit in silence and think about, like, so how's my day going?
Yeah.
Is this, does it feel like a good day? Not so good day? Why does it feel good? Oh, I really stayed up late last night. I
Hmm.
probably shouldn't have done that, but why did it? I mean, they're everyday little mundane things, but you have to become aware of what you're doing in order to change anything. It's funny. I have in in my online course, which is devoted to weight loss, I have what I call my road map, and MAP stands for, it's kind of like a framework I use,
Oh,
but it's a framework for change. It doesn't
mhm.
have to be for weight loss at all. But the M stands for mindset and motivation, and the A stands for awareness and action, and then the P is for um, planning and preparation.
Mm,
So that A, that, let's use weight loss because it's a very easy thing for people to get their head around,
yeah,
what they're trying to accomplish or whatever. And when somebody comes in, the first thing they want to do is they want to go into action. They want to
yeah,
skip MMA and go into action. And I say, you can't do that, because the first thing we have to do is we have to really get our heads wrapped around our mindsets. So whatever the behavioral change is, when you think about making this change, most people have some feelings that are going to come up. When it's weight loss, it's, I probably won't be successful.
yeah,
I've tried this 100 times before and nothing's really worked. I
yeah.
mean, maybe this will work, but it probably won't. If you go into that mindset, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. You will absolutely reinforce this. This won't be successful. So we have to work on that mindset first. We have to shift that mindset and bring it in more from a place of curiosity and interest, and let's see what happens, and experimentation.
Yes.
We're just going to experiment. Let's see what happens. Then we can start talking about the motivation. I don't even want to talk about why are you here first.
Mm,
I want to talk about, what is all, listen quietly to the voice in your head and tell me what comes up to you, when you think about that.
yeah.
But then we go in and it's like, okay, I know why I want to do this, and I'm fixing up my mindset. So let's act. Let's act. No, no. The next part, which is probably the most painful, is where you have to spend time in awareness, where you must step
Hmm.
back and look at yourself from afar and watch your habits. You need to become aware of what you are currently doing that isn't supporting weight loss, but you also should notice what you are doing that is.
Yeah,
You have to become aware of your habits. What am I doing that's working? I'm going to do more of that. What am I doing that's not working? I'm
yeah.
going to try and eliminate that. I can't know where you should begin action until we know what your habits are.
Yes.
It's so often where sleep comes into it. When I realize, like, well, I'm staying up really late at night to get my work done. And what's happening during that time? I'm eating chocolate to keep myself awake.
Hmm. Yeah, or that late
Oh,
night cup of
well,
coffee.
you know, that chocolate at 11 o'clock at night, maybe is putting another 400 calories into your fully daily thing.
Yeah,
Oh, so I just have to stop eating the chocolate. I don't know that that's the first thing you have to do, because if you still stay awake, you're not going to be able to do that. You're
yeah,
still going to we need to think about, oh, so this habit is tied to this. Maybe the first thing to start working on is sleep. I
yeah,
can't be up at 11:30 at night doing work. And also when I'm tired, ugh, I'm too tired to make myself a healthy breakfast. I'm just going to eat the bagel that's sitting on the counter. It's
yes.
all related, but you
It's
have to be aware. The first thing you really have to do is you got to look at what are you doing on a daily basis in anything you want to change.
yeah. And then
What are
that
you
awareness is that. Oh, sorry, there's a little
No,
lag. I
I
didn't
was
cut you
just going
off.
to
Please
say
go
it,
ahead.
just that, again, that thing of like, find what's working and do more of it. Become aware of the
Yeah.
habits that are not working, and let's figure out how to change those habits.
Yeah. That's what that scientific approach, that non-judgmental approach, right? Because as a scientist, when you create a hypothesis, obviously you want it to work out the experiments while you're doing it. You're trying to find the solution, but you're approaching the data non-judgmental as much as humans you can. I know I want it to be a positive result, but any result is a result. And I think the awareness word and acceptance to me, I kind of tie them together because I
Mm,
think people say
I love
accept
it.
it. I'm like, acceptance does not mean you renounce to it.
Right.
Acceptance is just your starting point in your GPS. If you know you want to go to, see the Blue Ridge Mountains, where are you coming from? Miami or California? It's just acceptance is the starting point. And if the more we can apply this, not and it's going to be about noticing how much judgment there is, putting it aside, that's the first step, and then going ahead and looking at the data. And the reality is this is complex individual tasks. So I want to say, even for all the coaches watching it, just because we know behavior change doesn't mean that we're not subject to these same human pitfalls, right? Someone I might have mentioned before, when my client said, "Oh, Diego, let's be so easy. You know how the brain works." I was like, "Listen, first of all, no one really knows how it works. Not me, not you. No, but it doesn't mean brain doesn't work that way still, right?" And so I think it's a normal part that you mentioned people failing. I tell all the students I train too. Every topic in coaching has a relatively higher importance and lower confidence. Otherwise, it wouldn't be they're talking about it with you. They've already had it done. So noticing that there's always going to be this gap here. And New Year's resolutions, you said, yeah, by February, whatever day, most fall off. But I think we see it regardless of the time of year. First session of coaching, really exciting. Oh my God, my life's gonna be so much better. Maybe session 2 or 3, that novelty is still there. What happens in session 4, 5, 6, 7, where your kid gets sick and there's a deadline at work and those things come away?
I always say about a month into coaching, there's a tremendous dip
Yeah.
in the enthusiasm of clients. The honeymoon is over.
Yes.
You
And
know,
that's where
they
the
go,
work
just like you
starts.
say, you go into client thinking like, yay, I just hired this coach who's going to fix all my problems, and then you're a month later, it's like, how come I still have these problems? I thought
Yeah.
I was going to lose 5 pounds this month. I only lost 1 pound. This is hard work. I have to keep doing this. It's the real honeymoon is over.
Yeah.
And I think that the talent is figuring out how to move that client past that hump.
Mm. Yeah, Ellen, you know what phrase I've come up with? I'm curious what you've, because we're speaking over almost out of time here, but I've come up with this idea that the order to make change sustainable, it's about being consistent, but that doesn't necessarily mean doing the same thing over again. It's
Mm,
being consistently to retry.
yeah.
So the
Yeah.
mornings don't work out, we're gonna retry the afternoons. This week didn't work out, we're gonna try next week again. That's what separates doing from not the long-term goals, is that you are consistently retrying. If you consistently retry anything, you'll do. And think about a physical activity here. Again, I go back to rollerblading. Someone asked me the other day, I was went to get some ice cream while skating. They go, "Well, how'd you learn?" They go, what if you fall?" I'm like, "You fell when you learn to walk." But look at kids, they don't stop till they walk.
Right.
Adults, we put on skates or whatever it is, we're like, "Oh, that was scary, I fell." If you
And
just do
not
it
do it
over and
again.
over time, your brain will learn it, right? So the real key
Absolutely.
is saying normalizing failure is part of that process, but you learn what didn't work, like Mr. Edison and Thomas, right? And continuing trying. And that a coach can really help you with these nuances of what that looks like. But it is normal to not succeed. That's part of any overnight success story. It's never overnight, right?
Right.
And to anyone watching, even coaches, I will say, because we both help student coaches, I think a lot of people say, "Well, how am I going to be a good coach if I also struggle?" Yeah, we're humans too. That's why we know. That's why I also have resolutions that I'm working a way to make them not just resolutions, right? Work with a professional, work with someone. There's a range of resources. Knowing how to use your resources is a
Yeah.
strength of a human being. You don't have to be a lone wolf in all this.
Yeah.
Um,
It's a great point, Diego. I have been blessed to know some incredibly masterful coaches. And one of the things that I would say probably most all have in common, at some point or another, they've worked with a coach.
yeah, yeah. And so, to all the coaches out here, I wish I had more time, Ellen. I know we've already had many conversations. We have many more. Love to have you back on. Really inspiring ways with the new year. And if I can give one hint to everyone who's not a coach, even a coach, to wrap up here, mentioned this before our talk earlier. Another key trick is to turn your outcome goal into a process goal.
Yes.
Right. So your outcome is to read a book, and I say I'll read my chapter a night. And wow, well, I didn't read that night. I got too tired. I was reading, fall asleep. Or your process is I'm going to spend 10 minutes a day reading. I'm trying to be more organized. My co-founders know that. So what does that look into a process goal, not just an outcome goal, right? So try to simplify it down into as little as possible. Ellen, it's been a
Bite
real
size.
honor, a real
Oh,
privilege having you
thank
today to
you.
kick off our
Thank you.
podcast for the
It's
first year. Hope to have
been
you
an honor for
back.
me to be there.
And we'll put all your links that we mentioned earlier to your site there. Anything else you want to mention to anyone, either a student watching, a client watching, as we sign off here to say goodbye to our audience as we wrap up here for the first episode of the new year?
Well, I think that yes, it's a wonderful thing to take assessment at the beginning of the year and think about maybe some things you want to do more of, some things you want to do less of, maybe some things you want to add and try, but don't make that a process that you only do at the beginning of the year.
Mm,
Maybe it's something you could any day of the week, any day of the month. If you decide that things are just, they don't even have to be terrible, but maybe just not the way you really want them to be, change is possible. That is one thing we do know, you know.
Yes.
The brain research has taught us that our brains are malleable until the day we are no longer here. So
Yes.
just become a lifelong learner and experiment.
Yeah. Your brain changes every day. Might as well be control some of that change as much as we can
Yeah,
be. Yeah.
absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. This has been a load of fun. And thanks so much to all of our listeners for
Yes.
being
Honor and
here.
privilege. Take care, everyone. Happy New Year. And we'll see everyone in 2 weeks from now for our next episode of Coach Connect. Take care, everyone. Bye
Okay.
bye.
Bye.
Stop the recording. And I gotta end it here also. Let's see. End stream.